Hello, my lovelies. Eileen Walsh here, welcoming you once again to Where the Road Rises, Law, Lessons, Legacy. In June this year, I was invited to present on my particular brand of relationship building and storytelling to the $1 Million Round Table International Conference attended by 10,000 people in Vancouver, Canada. The $1 Million Round Table is an organization for top producers in the insurance and financial industry. It was the largest, most dynamic event I have ever attended, never mind spoken at, and it was one of the most magnificent experiences of my life. I am sharing the simple tools I spoke of with you in the next two shows. The techniques that have contributed to my success that my international audience loved and are available for all of us to improve our relationships with clients, referral partners, team members, friends, family, and ourselves. I grew up in the Irish countryside, one of 12 children. We had 6 boys, 6 girls, my parents, and our great Aunt Rose in our small farmhouse. This was as recent as the 60s and 70s, not the turn of the century, but we were very rural and very poor, no electricity, no phone, no TV, we didn't even have running water when I was born. In the words of Dolly Parton, though we had no money, I was rich as I could be, however, in the raw material that would fuel my life's work. Looking back on my childhood now, eccentric neighbors, relatives, an occasional man of the roads gathering in our home, it was magical. By the open fire, fueled with turf dug from the ancient hills, the old people told stories of banshees, whiskey stills, blackthorn tree fairy rings, brutal oppression, hunger, uprising, and above all, survival. We listened spellbound. We would not have dreamt of interrupting. Our rural community was small and deeply connected. We attended the same parish school, went to the same church, and shopped in the nearby village. My early immersion in a tight community laid the foundation for my personal and professional success. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. The origins of unity, compassion, and empathy in our brain and nervous system. How to release in ourselves and others reactions that foster love and cooperation rather than intolerance and adversity. And I will encourage you to embrace story as a valuable tool to forge lasting relationships. My parents were hardworking, loving, and loyal. They lived by themselves into their 90s in the farmhouse I grew up in. Together for 70 years, they moved in complete symbiosis. No longer farming, my father tended his vegetables, and my mother, her children long raised, looked after her hens. They drank endless cups of tea and were, to quote the poet Munir, like seashells, constantly murmuring. They had their wits about them. However, when one of them had a health issue or needed to be hospitalized, they both became unmoored. They lost their grip on reality and became ghosts of themselves. When the health scares passed, my parents regained their capacity and came back to us. Looking back, I can see now their relationship with each other kept them healthy. Harvard University started a lifetime study of adult development 80 years ago. They started with 700 young men. Only recently have they started studying women. But 60 of those young men are still in that study today in their 90s. The findings of that study? Our relationships are the benchmark for the quality of our lives. Good relationships and strong social connections with family, friends, and community are key to a rich, long life. The study found that loneliness is a killer, literally. Isolation makes us unhappy, unhealthy, causes our brain to decline earlier and causes us to die younger. So too is conflict bad for our health. Also, it's not just the number of friends that is necessary for this benefit. Rather, it's the quality of close relationships that matter. The Harvard study found it was not cholesterol or weight that predicted how participants at 50 were going to grow old, but how satisfied they were with their relationships. Those who work hard to replace colleagues with playmates, stay connected to loved ones, are happiest in retirement, not those who made the most money or had the most prestigious careers. Warm relationships buffer against the slings and arrows of old age. Even those with physical pain in good relationships have less emotional pain, less suffering, less mood alteration than those in bad relationships or no relationship at all. Secure, attached relationships in our 80s and 90s don't just protect our bodies, they also protect our precious memory. My parents, surrounded by family and friends, immersed in their community and church and the heart of the countryside they loved, stayed sharp and eager towards life. Alone, they melted away. When we lost my mother in the summer of 21, my father lived less than a year afterwards. Their relationship with each other extended their lives. Their bond was not without effort. Creating powerful, meaningful relationships is slow, hard work, but it yields a rich premium that can be had no other way. And while this wisdom is as old as the hills, we easily forget it in our quick fix, binge watch, prime delivery society. Let me tell you a story about one of my clients. Jenny was single in her late 40s. She had raised 3 children and was working as a waitress in a truck stop. George was a truck driver, early 50s, also single, also raised 3 children. Being on the road was not conducive to building a relationship. He was rarely home, and when he was too tired to look for love. After clocking 2 million miles on the road, George thought he had seen it all, coast to coast, every corner of the country. He thought nothing could surprise him, and then he walked into Jenny's truck stop. He was transported to another world. A lonely, content bachelor for over 15 years, he had long stopped thinking about the one. But the moment he laid eyes on Jenny's radiant smile, he knew he wanted to marry her. Jenny took notice of George, but she was more guarded. She was an attractive waitress, had her fair share of flirtatious attention. However, notwithstanding that caution, they were married within a year. And although they had each raised a family, they knew together they had more to give, and they adopted 4 special needs children. Jenny and George were up to the challenge, and the new blended family thrived. But then, a challenge they could never have anticipated was around the corner. Jenny was scheduled for a simple surgery that went tragically wrong. She was supposed to simply wake up and walk out of the hospital the same day. Instead, there was a major complication, then medical malpractice, and Jenny woke up to the news that she was permanently paralyzed. Most people would buckle under this devastating blow. Jenny and George, however, were neither bitter nor did they waver in their beliefs. They found the grace to go on. They had children to raise who desperately needed them, and they had each other. Those 4 children are all grown now, and Jenny's condition worsens, but I have never seen her without her radiant smile. And whenever I am in their company, George is always holding her hand. And they tell me they are blessed beyond measure. Their story is a testament to the power of love. Darwin in The Descent of Man mentions love 95 times. Survival of the fittest, only twice. He said humans are not strong like primates, but their strength lies in having evolved to take care of each other. There are profound reproductive and survival reasons for this. Important parts of our brain and nervous system are shaped by genes to help us connect and cooperate. Love and compassion are coded into our DNA. If we see someone performing an action, the same neuron lights up as if we were performing that action. This phenomenon is known as neuron mirroring. It means there is something in the brain that does not distinguish between self and others. We are neurologically designed to suffer when we see someone suffer, soar when we see someone else soar. Mirror neurons gear us up to feel at a primordial level what another person feels. As social creatures, we depend on each other for survival and happiness. Therefore, the more love and empathy we feel, the more likely we are to protect and defend each other. The neurochemical oxytocin is a key player in what scientist Zach calls this neural ballet. Oxytocin is a sequence of 9 amino acids produced in the hypothalamus. Oxytocin is produced when we are trusted or shown kindness. Flowing through the bloodstream in high levels, it promotes monogamy, caregiving, cooperation, and generosity. And it does this by enhancing empathy, our ability to bond and connect with another's experience. The vagus nerve is another rock star in this process. The vagus nerve is often called the love nerve because of its link to a flourishing, meaningful life. The vagus nerve originates in the oldest part of the mammalian brain and is loaded with oxytocin receptors. When the vagus nerve fires, we feel a rush of emotion. Our body is getting us ready for compassion. I love the series This I Believe on National Public Radio. In one episode, Chilean writer Isabel Allende tells the story of her darling daughter Paula, who suffered a brain injury, then fell into a coma. Isabel took tender care of Paula in her home until she died in Isabel's arms at age 29. Silent in her bed, my daughter taught me a lesson that is now my mantra. All you have is what you give, and it is by spending yourself you become rich. When she died, I thought I had lost everything, but then I realized I still had the love I had given her, a love that keeps growing and multiplying and giving fruit. I cannot read Isabel's story of caring for her daughter without feeling a swelling in my chest, a sensation in my throat, and tears welling in my eyes. I feel touched, humble, grateful, and my heart opens to love and healing. How amazing is that? Simply reading words on a page, listening to a story, a song, watching a movie can create a profound chemical reaction in our body. This is described by neuroscientists as the elevation response. If we see humanity suffering, an act of bravery, people helping each other in a disaster, we hear an inspiring story, we react instinctively. We are equipped for a compassionate response to the trouble of others. The vagus nerve connects the humanity in us despite our political party, ethnic group, or race, etc. And there are vagal superstars who have increased positive emotions daily. They are more resilient to bereavement, they're more sympathetic, they're trusted more in interactions with strangers, they're more altruistic and have a stronger immune response. We as business owners, partners, parents, leaders, and friends, we can be vagal superstars too. We can improve our vagal profile by focusing on the other person we are with, their words, tone, body language. Hear what they are not saying. Develop our learned intuition to meet their needs. You can improve your vagal profile by immersing yourself in worlds beyond your own that will expand your mind. Travel and read. It is consistently found that reading makes us more empathetic. We get exposed to what Carlos Castaneda calls the many-roomed mansion beyond the room we were born in. You will begin to see situations far differently, from different perspectives, allowing you to relate to emotions and motives and thought processes far different from your own. Community service is another powerful tool to hone positive chemical responses. Volunteer your time, give from your bounty. It has been said there is no such thing as true altruism because we cannot give, even anonymously, without getting something back. You give away bread, it comes back buttered. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "When we serve others, we discover a deep contentment and ecstasy that is absent in the opposite." The more you have that feeling, the higher your vagal profile. And not only do you want to be a vagal superstar, you also want to be able to release that response in others. When customers walk in your door or your students, they often have cortisol and adrenaline flowing through their body. They may have been stuck in traffic, feel nervous, feel reluctant to discuss difficulties, be afraid to be vulnerable, dread the costs. Cortisol and adrenaline make people intolerant, irritable, narrow, and critical. It's therefore your task to change your prospect's chemical composition from what David Philip calls the devil's cocktail to the angel's cocktail through interactions that release not only oxytocin, but the other components of the angel cocktail, endorphins and dopamine. You can release endorphins by making people laugh. When they laugh, they become more creative and relaxed. I often start a presentation by saying, "You have all heard the term, where there's a will, there's a way." Well, I am going to rewrite it. Where there is no will, there are way too many relatives looking for money. When I invite my guests to try the coffee cake, I tell them I was up all night baking it. Just simple little jokes that break the ice and get us all laughing and comfortable. I often tell clients about my adventures as a trial lawyer by day and a cocktail waitress by night during my first year of practice. I wanted my school loan paid quickly and get great trial experience, so for a time, I kept my foot in both worlds. I was a waitress on a casino riverboat, and the courthouse was just across the riverfront. My double life led to many hilarious outcomes. Dopamine is created when you tell your listeners an interesting story. Remember your teacher or grandparents reading aloud to you? Long ago, deep in a forest that clung to the topmost crag of a distant mountain. Upon hearing those words, you shed your own world and sank into the world of the story. I lost both my parents in the same year, and because visits to Ireland during their last illness and death punctuated my busy practice, I was often rescheduling, apologizing, explaining my absence to clients. I would tell them my parents' story. My mother grew up in the hungry 30s. She had a hard life. In my memory, she was always cooking, baking, washing clothes by hand, often scolding, and always loving. She said she was happiest when her baby was sleeping in the cradle and their clothes were blowing on the line. My mother was the heart and soul of our home. She was always in the kitchen, and the kitchen was always warm. If ever my mother was not home and the fire out and the kitchen cold, we felt that life had ended. It hardly ever happened, but when it did, we were desolate because home was mommy and a warm kitchen. As my mother's health declined, my team managed my practice and my husband held the fort at home, allowing me the gift of being with her. My mother's faith infused her final days. Our longtime parish priest, as old as her and as sad to see her go as we were, and a young curate who went to school with my nephew, visited her daily, saying prayers for the dying, giving a medieval-sounding plenary indulgence, and last rites. Her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren wove in and out of her bedside, saying rosaries, blessed candles burning. The things my mother gave her life to, faith and family, gave back to her 100-fold as she lay dying, peaceful and ready for her eternal reward. One of my fondest childhood memories is my father's rendition of the cremation of Sam McGee. He was most apt to tell it on a Saturday night after a visit to the pub, we later learned, with a bundle of us children gathered round him. His voice was layered, deep and resonant, his timing and pacing hypnotic. We were transfixed, swept away to the Arctic trails with their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. At my father's wake, we each read a verse in his honor, evoking love and warmth and tearful tenderness. The wash of those words over time and memory is ancient and familiar as all our lives. We still wake our dead at home in Ireland, in the countryside, a ritual all but gone in the rest of the world. We keep vigil with the body through the long hours of the night, drinking tea, whiskey, telling stories, laughing and crying. We never leave the body alone. On the morning of my parents' funerals, their children, first their sons, then their daughters, then grandchildren, neighbours and friends carried their coffins on their shoulders along narrow winding roads, lined with mourners to their burial in our country churchyard. Clients were kind, patient and understanding. By sharing my story, by releasing oxytocin and dopamines, rather than getting irritated by delay, they were with me in my grief and loss. Look how the whole world a few summers ago was gripped by and emotionally invested in the thrilling rescue of 12 young boys from a cave in Thailand. That warm sunny day, the boys had just won their soccer game and were on a celebratory bike ride through the countryside with their coach. They discovered a cave and went in to explore, little knowing the events that were about to unfold. Sudden torrential rain sealed the entrance and trapped the boys inside. Volunteers, rescue professionals, doctors, diving experts traveled from all over the world and worked around the clock to rescue them. Media covered the drama 24/7. We watched breathlessly as one by one the boys emerged unharmed. Real human stories are compelling. They stop us in the clamor of world affairs, politics, wars, elections, the stock market, and connect us, teach us compassion, make us feel more human and open our hearts to love and beauty. Character-drawn stories consistently cause oxytocin synthesis. Your clients will bond with you, trust you, feel generous towards you. A story is the most reliable method of communicating information, complex ideas, emotions, and experience, and the most powerful way to change mindset, attitude, behaviors, and beliefs. It is also the most effective way to motivate, teach, and convince another. Stories make sense, hold attention, and are remembered. They break down walls, influence people. Your customers will respond emotionally to a story in a way they will not to logic and facts. Attention is increased when you tell a story. Your listener becomes more focused, motivates, and remembers things more positively. Our minds are evolutionary hardwire at least 100,000 years before our birth to think in specific story terms. These neural story maps are housed in the subconscious mind and automatically applied to information. A fascinating concept called neurocoupling occurs when a story is being told. The neurons in the listener's mind sync with the neurons of the storyteller, and the brain activates to allow the listener to assimilate the story into their own experience. Our clients want to and will automatically see themselves in the story, which is a natural path for you to craft the story so clients recognize themselves and the solution to their problems in it. The more emotionally invested we are, the less critical we become. And that is what makes story such a powerful business tool and why we must use it with honesty and integrity. Build a collection of success stories and cautionary tales. Keep them interesting, simple, and easy to follow. For me, as an estate planning attorney, end-of-life decisions are an opportunity for intimacy and shared vulnerability. Discussion of a client's personal faith, philosophy, skepticism, miracles naturally taps into the storytelling vein. I have a host of client perspective to share on the pain of making end-of-life decisions for loved ones and their relief through planning with me to take this decision out of their children's hands. Celebrity deaths, a common point of reference and interest in with a dash of glamour and intrigue, present an opportunity to illustrate excellent or more often inadequate planning. The mess a grieving family has to confront without planning, the expense of probate, losing money to taxes, litigation, claims, and families at war over assets are all fodder for cautionary tales. By contrast, the smooth, private, protected estate administration stories illustrate success. Hone your storytelling art, your eloquence, your command of the language, and your way with words. Use visual language and draw your listener into the story so they are right there with you by the bedside, the graveside, or in the courtroom. You do not have to be a natural. You don't need a pipe, a cap, and a fireside. This is a skill you can perfect. A great way to improve is to read aloud. If you have young children or grandchildren, you have a ready-made audience to practice with. An old elocution trick is to read aloud from Shakespeare, Dickens, or the King James Bible. The archaic language slows you down and forces you to articulate clearly. Join me again in part 2 of Relationships and Storytelling, where we will discuss building a story brand, unwrapping the needs of others through story, and the capstone of my story immersion, writing a legacy letter. I will leave you with the words of Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl on service to others. We who lived in concentration camps remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from us, but one thing, the human freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Thank you. Until next time, goodbye.